KaBum's first win.
Thanks, Freak, and a very back-and-forth win at that. But guys, before we actually get into the game, I want to talk about the fact that these are two teams coming from different regions. And as a matter of fact, to add to that, they have never actually played each other in a scrim or anything like that. They may have seen each other in solo queue, things like that, as I know some of them, they play cross-region on the servers. But as a team, they've never actually competed up against each other. That's got to play into a little bit of the unknown when you're walking into a very high-pressure situation like this.
Yeah, you could definitely tell from the way that they were playing against each other. You're kind of feeling your opponents out. They've watched each other's matches when they both got first place in their respective regions, and they are familiar with each other's play styles a bit. That's why the picks and bans, we saw the jungler focus and things like that. But you come in with your own game plan, and there sometimes throws you off, but the adjustment mid-game is something you have to think about there, because like the Tristana, the Bloodthirster, not going for the Blade of the Ruined King against such a tanky lineup is a choice he was willing to make because the Rise was doing so much damage to him. And I like things like that you see, but ultimately it doesn't seem like the right choice in that little adjustment there. But back and forth, I do think that it plays a huge factor. Like, you have to be able to play against these guys and figure it out. And I think that game right there, I think the games further on are going to have lower average game times because you're feeling your opponent out.
Of course, you can always look back at people's VODs, things like that. So it's not like they haven't had the opportunity to dissect team play and things like that. But Pobelter, how much of this first game can you kind of chalk up as a player on one of these teams to we were feeling them out? Like, we're not entirely certain what they're capable of. So it's more of a learning game, and we're going to move forward from here. And then how much of it is like, oh my goodness, what are we up against? After seeing the result of that game, how do you proceed?
I think that both games kind of took it that way. We didn't really see any out-of-the-box picks from either team, and so I think they were just both playing standard, both getting a feel for their opponents. I think KaBum should feel really comfortable. They made so many concessions in that game, but were still able to come out with the win in the end. So I think that they're confident in their individual ability to just drag the game out as late as they can. If they make some mistakes, so be it. But if it goes on long enough, we will win. I think that's the sort of mentality that they have.
All right, given the fact that they had to make so many concessions and PEX was able to pick up many early objectives, as Jap pointed out, they had 2 early Barons, they had some early Dragons, they had 3 early kills. Is it possible that we see them actually look for earlier game picks so they can capitalize off that gold? Because they still needed to get those items onto Rise, still needed to get those items onto Maokai for them to really play a big role in punishing KaBum for those early takeaways.
I think a lot of it was catch-up at that point because KaBum just had stronger laners across the board. Maokai was winning top lane. Orianna was actually going a little bit... Alistar was winning against Maokai. And then in the mid lane, we saw Tin doing really well against Uri, who is the star player on that team. And then Minerva down bottom had such a huge CS advantage early on that he just kept pushing it. I mean, like 50s, 60s on Tristana is just spelling death for the late game.
All right, well, now if we actually jump into the game, let's take a look at it, because I think it's kind of interesting to just look at the way that different regions prioritize picks. We saw a Vi ban, which is obviously a very targeted ban. So that's, just what are your thoughts on that as an NALCS pro Pobelter? Like, looking at other regions and going, oh my god, that's so interesting that they prioritize that champion so highly, because you would almost never see, granted, we did see Vi picked this split either once or twice, but you would almost never see that champion picked up in NALCS play.
Well, I think you can kind of see what they prioritize in the style of game they play. Vi and J4, they're very good at snowballing, and but they can really only do it if there's a lack of vision on the other side. Yes?
Oh, no, I was letting you finish first.
Oh, okay. So I don't think that the Latin American and the Brazilian teams focus warding quite heavily as we do in North America, and so I think maybe that's why those champions are a bit stronger for them.
Yeah, I think a big thing there is the team style of KaBum is they like to camp that mid lane because Tin, this 17-year-old mid laner who just has so much talent in him, and I absolutely hate guys that are just so talented at such a young age in that mid lane that I can't stand like being in the same room as them at all, ever. But yeah, Tin, he's kind of the star of that team in a way, and they like to camp that mid lane, and they use Danagorn in that regard, but when he has Vi, they'll pair it with something like an Ahri. When he has J4, it's like, yes, we can force this issue very early on, and against something like a Rise, it's perfect. But instead, he altered his game plan this game, and he just kind of affected all of the lanes as much as he could. because it didn't end up with very good objective control on his end because he was too focused on the lanes.
Well, definitely, yeah, favoring those, gank-heavy junglers. Jarvan Vi ended up on Kha'Zix, which still has a fair amount of gank presence. And as you said, they had to concede a lot of objectives. But we are going to pull up a replay of one that they didn't have to concede because he managed to get in there for the steal. So we're going to pull this up on your screens here about 48.5 minutes in. Zyrene, if you don't mind walking us through this replay.
Yeah, they pretty much come straight up Danagorn. He's looking for the first Baron of the game here for KaBum. And Lep, we're sitting here on the analyst desk going, remember that time that Alistar 1v5'd and he didn't learn his lesson? That's pretty much Lep all game long. We'll start rolling the clip out here because it ends up being a 2-for-2 in the end with the Baron being stolen away here. Danagorn, he walks around so that he avoids the Glacial Fissure, and he jumps over the wall with evolved wings, so you had to have left the pit to actually zone him out completely. So Maokai would have had to peel off and get to him with a Twisted Advance to lock him down, but he had to have walked through multiple members to get there. So I like the adjustment there. But then Tin Owns, he just has so much damage output here. He did the highest damage in the game by a large margin, basically pulling what Shifter did previously on Ziggs, but this time on Orianna, and caused a lot of disruption. His Ori ultimates were pretty on point that game.
All right.
There's a reason it was banned 4 times against him in the finals.
Well, yeah, of course. And we continue to see KaBum close out that game fairly easily. Following that Baron, they were back in control. Pobelter, one final question to you. As you had stated, you don't think that these next games will go quite as long as the teams have now gotten their bearings under them and they've seen what the other ones are capable of. So what are your predictions in terms of how these games are going to go? Who's going to come out on top? Do you see one team running away with it now that they've gotten the first win?
I think my vote goes to KaBum. I think they'll focus less on trying to go for these jungle invades, which didn't really turn out for them the first game, and just kind of go for snowballing the lanes and pushing down turrets. And so I think if they focus on the game that sort of way, then they'll have a much easier time winning.
All right. Well, PEX has a few more minutes to get their game plan going, and we're going to take an AFK for about 3.5 minutes. But when we come back, we'll see if KaBum can keep up the momentum going into Game 2 versus PEX. Don't touch that browser.
Let's see Rengar. They're going to take damage pretty soon. There's a flash and steal from Frahio, and he's going to be going down. Raya in the front lines, and down goes Left. Beautiful shot from to buy some time, but there comes Yuri trying to get 10. They caught the backline. The root onto Dance. Who cares about an Alistair? Kill everybody else. Nega JP, 2 hits from dead, but he's got a GA. Manta Raya now in the front lines. He's going to take it up, and they take down Danagorn. They're going to turn back on everybody else now. Bad Milk in the front lines, and that will be a very dead Braum.